Hello everybody, and welcome to this build of Eduard's 1/72 scale Hellcat. In this video, rather than talking too much about the build itself, there are enough videos out there anyway, I'll be telling you the story that made me want to build this particular airplane pilot combination in the first place. In this, Lieutenant Alex Raichu started his day with 12 victories and ended it with 18. On the 12th of June 1944, the US Navy began pre-invasion attacks on the Marianas east of the Philippines, surprising the Japanese, who assumed the next invasion would be further south. The Japanese were still looking for their doctrinal decisive battle in which they would so thoroughly destroy their enemy that the US would be forced to the negotiating table. For the long-awaited Kentai Kessen, IJN Admiral Toyoda immediately ordered a fleet-based counterattack, commuting nearly all of the serviceable ships the Imperial Japanese Navy still had left. On the evening of the 15th of June, two task forces were spotted by US submarines. 9 carriers, 5 battleships, 13 cruisers and 31 destroyers were on their way to throw the Americans back into the sea. On the morning of the 19th of June, land-based Japanese aircraft spotted the US task force. The way of aerial warfare had so far followed a pattern. The side to spot the enemy first was the one that won. Osawa now held that critical advantage, and his 9 carriers began launching at dawn. After a quick sortie against land-based aircraft on the morning of the 19th, the US Task Force radars began showing Admiral Osawa's great aerial host at 0950. Beyond the horizon, 120 miles out, were the incoming planes from 9 Japanese carriers. Over the flagship's radio went the call, "Hey Rube," a signal that recalled the Hellcat drivers to the vicinity of the carriers. The enemy would get the first attack. But Carrier Admiral Mitcher, forewarned, was preparing a welcoming committee on a scale never before mustered. The intercom on USS Lexington carried 2 sharp whistles from the boatswain's pipe, and then the general quarters alarm sounded. As elevators rumbled and pilots ran to their planes, the fighter squadrons of 15 carriers began layering in depth. When Alex Raichu jogged up the steps from the ready room to the Lexington's flight deck, he found a dozen Hellcats lined up. "No one kicked tires," he said. "It was just climb aboard and go." As he got airborne, the fighter direction officer's voice crackled over his radio. "Vector 250, climb to Eagles 25, pronto." Raichu didn't wait around for the rest of Fighting 16. "It was a running rendezvous on the climb," he said. air search radar put to use by competent fighter direction teams changed the game of task force air defense, multiplying significantly the advantage and proficiency enjoyed by the US pilots on an individual basis. Normally, combat air patrols had to cover large swaths of sky, but with shipboard search radar doing its thing, fighters could beeline in swarms straight to the target, attacking while their fuel tanks were still full. The contrail effect helped in that task too. When Alex tried to throw his engine into high blower to intercept, he realized his plane was sick. It was his bilge level luck to find that his plane was lame at the start of what promised to be the sortie of his life. Struggling to climb, Raichu watched helplessly as the squadron skipper surged high and far ahead. Soon they were out of sight. 60 miles from the Lexington were 70 Japanese planes, but Alex had to wait his turn. He cussed his luck as a film of oil began collecting on his windscreen. An engine leak. He eased back on the throttle and his division mate stayed with him as a matter of course, before the force fighter direction officer in the Lexington ordered Raichu's division to return and orbit the task group. He had barely begun to comply when the fighter director raised him again, directing him back to the west. There was something in his voice, Raichu said, that indicated he had a good one on the string. Another wave was inbound, 75 miles out. Raichu figured to catch them at the midpoint. Alex Raichu was among the swarm of F6F pilots who pressed their luck in the neighborhood of the battleships, which had come under attack to the west of the Marianas. Locating a group of at least 50 enemy planes, Raichu rocked his wings and peeled away to attack a Judy at the edge of the formation. His adrenaline had hit high C, he said, when he found himself nudged aside by another Hellcat pilot with similar thoughts. Turning away and diving beneath the formation to size it up, Raichu thought, there are enough cookies on this plate for everyone. Counting the Judys, Jills, and Zeeks, he radioed his count to Lexington and worked his way into position to attack some Judys. Easing down on them from behind, he picked a plane that was wildly evading, its rear gunner firing away. Raichu nudged his stick, adjusting until the dive bomber sat beneath the pipper of his Mark 8 gun sight. His 6 machine guns tore into the plane and fell away smoking. He pulled up and away again and lined up a pair of Judys, burning them one after the other, the last of them from close enough to see the results personally. He watched the rear seat gunner peppering at him for a moment before the man vanished, sucked down by his dying plane's sharp plummeting arc. For a split second I almost felt sorry for the little bastard, Raichu would say of his third kill within minutes. The enemy planes had been pretty well shot down, but a substantial number remained. It didn't look like we would score a grand slam. I reported this information back to base. The sky appeared to be full of smoke and pieces of planes, and we were trying to ride herd on the remaining attacking planes and keep them from scattering. Another meatball broke formation up ahead, and I slid over onto his tail, again working in close because of my oil-smeared windscreen. I gave him a short burst, and it was enough. It went right into the sweet spot at the root of his wing tanks. The pilot control cables must also have been hit, because the burning plane twisted crazily, out of control. In spite of our efforts, the Jills were beginning to descend to begin their torpedo runs, and the remaining Judys were at the point of peeling off to go down with their bombs. I headed for a group of 3 Judys in a long column. By the time I had reached the tail ender, we were almost over our outer screen of ships, but still fairly high. The first Judy was about to begin his dive, and as he started to nose over, I noticed black puffs beside him in the sky. Our 5-inchers were beginning to open up. Foolishly, maybe, I overtook the nearest one. It seemed that I barely touched the trigger and his engine started coming to pieces. The Judy started smoking, then torching alternately off and on as it disappeared below. The next one was about 1/5 of the way down in his dive, trying for one of the destroyers before I got up with him. This time a short burst produced astonishing results. Number 6 blew up with a tremendous explosion right in front of my face. I must have hit his bomb. I've seen planes blow up before, but never like this. I yanked the stick up sharply to avoid the scattered pieces and flying hot stuff, then radioed, "Splash number 6. There's one more ahead, and he's headed for a BB, but I don't think I can make it." Hardly had the words left my mouth and the Judy caught a direct hit that removed it immediately as a factor to be worried about in the war. He had run into a solid curtain of steel from the battle wagon. Looking around at that point, only Hellcats seemed to be remaining in the sky. Glancing backwards to where we had begun, in a pattern 35 miles long, there were flaming oil slicks in the water and smoke still hanging in the air. It didn't seem like 8 minutes. It seemed longer. But that's all it was. An 8-minute opportunity for the flight of a lifetime. It was a rout. The Hellcat jockeys seemed likelier to be hit by falling brass cartridges ejecting from the wings of their section leaders ahead than by bullets fired by a Sikh or a Hamp behind. Returning to Lexington, Alex Reicher began his circling descent into the landing pattern. Normally the routine was all rush and hustle. Fighter pilots ran down to their ready rooms before unloading what they remembered of their mission to an intelligence officer. After receiving a quick debriefing and checking notices on the blackboard, they returned to the flight deck, ready for another chance to boost their own and their unit's score. From their attitude, observed the war correspondent, it would have been reasonable to guess they were engaged not in a battle at all, but in some especially fast and exciting game like polo or hockey. As the task force flagship, the Lexington carried an unusually large collection of journalists. They mobbed Reichu as he filled out his maintenance paperwork. One of them had seen him flash 6 fingers to Mitcher on the flag bridge as his Hellcat rolled past the island. He was asked to repeat the gesture for the camera. Reichu the Impaler looked up, smiled broadly, and held up 6 fingers to show his score. His plane handlers then noticed something truly remarkable: his ammunition usage for the day. To bring down 6 planes, Reichu had fired a total of only 360 rounds, just 10 bullets per gun for each kill. His efficiency was as much a mark of pride as the hand-painted red sunbursts that would adorn his Hellcat below the canopy track. The Battle of the Philippine Sea would end up as a decisive battle, just not for the Japanese. While the Americans lost 123 aircraft and suffered a damaged battleship, the Japanese lost between 550 and 645 aircraft, 3 carriers were lost, and several other ships were damaged. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, as it would also be known, along with the Battle of Leyte Gulf a few months later, so thoroughly destroyed the Imperial Japanese Navy's ability to launch air operations that it wouldn't be a factor again during World War II. If you're interested in learning more about the end of the war in the Pacific, I can heartily recommend the book Fleet at Flood Tide by James T. Hornfischer, as well as his other books on the Pacific War. So that's it for this video. If you liked what you saw or heard, please consider liking or subscribing if you want to. If you didn't like what you saw or heard, I thank you for watching this long. Enjoy the pictures of the finished build. Bye bye!